I did want to clarify on the diagram that Fast Ethernet 0/1 is the interface leading to host 1 and Fast Ethernet 0/2 is the one leading to host 2. We're going to see port security in action, and I'm going to use a secure MAC address different than the one you see on the board. Because what we're going to do here is on that port leading to host 1, we're going to enable port security, and we're going to put a secure MAC address on there that cannot possibly match traffic that's actually going to come in from host 1. So what I like to do, especially in lab environments, not a bad idea for production either, is before, let me check that port. Before I start working with port security, I like to shut the port down. And I've already done that on 0/1. It's administratively down because I don't want any traffic from something that I don't know is running or forgot was running to trickle in and trigger port security when I'm in the middle of it. Because right now, if I look at that table, our address table, you can see that it's empty. So right now I've got port 1 shut, so it can't possibly learn anything. And let's go ahead to fast01. And we'll do a switch port security. That's to enable it. Then we can use our up arrow. And let's look at our options again. We've got aging, MAC address, maximum, and violation. Right now we're going to work with MAC address. And we've got Triple H and we've got sticky addresses. So right now we're going to work with the regular MAC address type. We've got a lab with sticky addresses coming up later. And I'm going to define the all A's MAC address as a secure address. So far so good, and really that's all there is to it outside, of course, testing it. But let's look around at show port security commands before we do that. And you can see here's our secure port 0/1, one maximum secure address. The current count is 1 because it's counting the static one we put in. There haven't been any security violations yet, and a security action is at our default of shutdown. So let's look at address. And there's the VLAN 100, which by the way I've put both hosts into during the break. And there's the secure MAC address we've configured. And notice it even says type secure configured. That means that we statically entered it. Here are the ports that we're considering that address to be secure on, and our aging is disabled right now, so that's why we have a dash there. It's disabled by default. So let's run show port security. Let's use our up arrow there. And we're going to take it to the interface level. Very important difference I want to show you here. We see that port security is enabled, which is a good thing because we just enabled it. Port status secure down. I want you to take note of what this says when the port is administratively down, which it is right now, as opposed to what it's going to say if and when port security shuts it down. Everything else pretty much exactly what we'd expect. And here's the last source address it saw. That was during, and that's actually the source MAC address of the interface on host 1. So it's holding that because I did something with that during the break and some frames came in on it, but we have a security violation count of 0. So let's see what happens though when we do a no shut on that. And I'll save that and I'll go on over to 1 and send some pings now that the interface is up. And it may have already gotten some traffic, but we'll see how that goes. And let's see what we get here on switch 1. We send some pings from host 1. And we're getting something. And we're getting some more. And you know what? None of that looks good. Not one little bit of it. But it is what we expected to see. Because when those frames came in with a non-secure MAC address, first, the P-secure violation error detected on Fast Ethernet 0/1, and the switch put Fast 0/1 in error disabled state. Right with that, I don't even want to say after that because you see the timestamp. It happened at the same time. Here's your port security P-secure violation message. Security violation occurred, and it was caused, I know most of that one word is off, but it was caused by MAC address, and there's the address that caused it on the port. So we're even finding out what the non-secure MAC address is just from the console messages. Then we see the usual suspects as far as the line protocol and the interface going physically down. So let's start doing our show commands, because let's just say you walked in on the middle of this, or the exam or job interview or anything just plops you right in the middle of it, didn't show you these console messages like, okay, tell me what's going on. Well, first off, we could just look at the interface. We don't have to use a port security command to get some important information here. Now, we get a ton of info, but what we're really interested in is at the top here, the interface is physically down, logically down, and it's error disabled. That is the big important part right there. So now let's revisit our show port security commands. We'll start with show port security. And now the important difference from what we saw earlier, of course, security violation count is 1. So show port security tells you there has been a security violation on there. It's not giving you much more information about it though. So let's do show port security address. And this really looks the same as it did before because this is just showing you your secure MAC address table. It's not going to show you violations, anything like that. Where we might get some more good information is here. And show port security interface fast 0/1. Port security is still enabled, and note the status. It is secure and shut down. Just because you see the word down next to port status, it doesn't mean that port security has shut the port down. It just meant that it was down. And we know why, because it was administratively down. Everything else, here's your security violation count. That's the big difference right there. And again, it's even showing you the last source address, VLAN 100. And there you go. So we know now what it looks like with 4 different show commands and the console messages when a port goes down due to the shutdown mode in port security. So now you and I as the network admins have to do 2 things. First off, we have to fix the problem. We should do that first. And then we can reset the port. Because by default, if a port is error disabled, we have to fix the issue and then reset the port. It's not going to reset itself by default. So let's go ahead and take care of business here. First off, how would we resolve the issue? What do? We just take that static entry out. And there's no switch port. All I did was do a Control-A to move the cursor to the front and type the word no. Saves you a lot of typing. We can do a show port security address just to verify it's come out, and you can see now the table is empty. So now this is interesting because what's going to happen when we reset the port? The port is going to have a maximum of 1 secure MAC address, but we have it statically configured in it. So that means that the very next source MAC address that comes in on a frame onto this port, that is going to be learned as the secure MAC address. That's the way it works. So let's go ahead and just do our shut no shut here. And we'll wait until everything comes administratively up as opposed to administratively down. And of course, we're going to check that interface before we go any further. And we can see now that we have gotten rid of the error disabled message. So that is a good thing. Now, let's see. I don't think that we've learned that address yet. So let's go over to 1. And we'll send those pings again. And we're sending some pings through that switch, so let's give it a few seconds here. We haven't seen any secure violations, port violations, anything like that so far. Is our interface still up? Should be. Yep, it's still up and up. And there is our dynamically learned MAC address, secure MAC address. You see the big difference here is that the type is secure dynamic. So for a source MAC address to be considered dynamically secure, there's got to be a difference between the number of maximum addresses the port can learn and the number that it's actually learned. So we see now that since we had the port set for 1 address to be learned and no static configurations, the very next address it learned, very next source MAC address, was going to be considered the secure one. So we're good there. Let's go ahead and just run show port security, and we can see that it has indeed learned 1 address. We just verified that by looking at the table, and more importantly, much more importantly, the security violation count is empty. So finally, you think I'd remember that after all these years. Interface fast 0/1, and we can see the combination we really like to see, that port security has indeed been enabled. We knew that part, but finally the port status is secure and up, and that is what we want. You can also see the security violation count is now at 0. The last source address VLAN is the same as it's been. So that is port security in action. That's our shutdown mode. And in the very next video, I think we're going to go over to switch to host 2 and work with that port a little bit, and you'll see some other real world scenarios in action. I'll see you on the very next vid.